Right, colleagues, the Deputy First Minister is happy to take a couple of questions. So we have questions that have been submitted to us, and I'm going to call on those colleagues to come forward and ask the question. I think there's a couple of microphones ready to go. So I'd like to call on Gordon West. Where are you, Gordon? Here. Huh?
Thank you for that, and thank you for being here this morning. The current version of Included, Engaged and Involved Part 2 states clearly that short-term exclusion, quote, should be a proportionate response, quote, but also that, quote, the well-being and safety of the whole school community should also be taken into account when considering exclusion, close quote. In cases like where a pupil has seriously assaulted a fellow pupil or even a member of staff, parents and staff appear to believe that a short-term exclusion is a proportionate response. Do you agree?
Well, if it's in the policy document, I suppose I better agree with government policy. It's always, I've kind of found it quite a helpful way forward to agree with the governments on policy documents. I do, but I see that within a context that I do want to minimise exclusion, because for obvious reasons, exclusion means young people are not participating in their education. So there must be a range of different approaches and devices taken forward to tackle unacceptable behaviour. It cannot be left unaddressed. If it's left unaddressed, it'll, in my humble opinion, probably get worse. So it has to be addressed. And we should be using a variety of interventions that are not, the immediate recourse of which is not to exclude. Because I think exclusion is harmful, and I think it makes the challenge of involving young people in their education and fulfilling their commitment even greater. I was taking part yesterday in a conference organised by Celsius, the Centre for Looked After Children in Scotland, in Glasgow. And one of the statistics I was showing, or concentrating on, was the fact that for looked after children, looked after children are about, I think it's 9 times more likely to be excluded from school than children who are not looked after. Now that rate has reduced, that level of exclusion of looked after children has reduced dramatically in the last 10 years, but it's still 9 times higher than non-looked after children. Now that suggests to me that there are underlying factors affecting looked after children that make them, in a sense, well, it speaks for itself, there's a greater propensity for exclusion, which if we're trying to assist young people who've had amongst the hardest experiences of life, we have to find other ways of going about it than exclusion. And I pay tribute to the profession for the achievements that have been made, because it is a much, much better position today than it was 10 years ago. And that's not been achieved easily. It's been challenging for that to be achieved. But it demonstrates that we have still got some way to go to try to address. And some of the issues you raise from the Included, Engaged report will focus on that cohort of young people as well. So I absolutely believe that the safety and the well-being of members of staff and of pupils must be a major consideration in any judgments, and that must be protected. We cannot have people in an unsafe environment. It's fair on nobody, and it's appropriate for nobody. But I do want us as a system to do the work that I think we are doing well, which is to reduce exclusion, because if we do that, we will have more active participation in learning, and we'll have better prospects of closing the attainment gap.
Catherine Nichol. Where are you, Catherine? Oh, no, yeah.
Good morning, Mr. Swinney. Thanks for being with us this morning. You're very welcome. You have alluded already to your visits around many schools in Scotland. Have you identified any measures that you feel would reduce teacher workload significantly?
I think, well, I spent a lot of time in my comments, Catherine, talking about this issue. And I think largely, let me try and summarise what I took on far longer than I should have taken from the podium to say it to you in my answer to you. I think the key to this is about having a more confident profession that is trusted. A profession that is not confident and not trusted is one that will do lots of pointless tasks and record pointless information for no value whatsoever. So if we have a trusted profession which is confident about its professional practice and invests in its professional practice, then I think we will have less recourse and necessity to, it's actually not necessity, it's the wrong word to use, less recourse to and less reliance on the collection of pointless information for pointless purposes. If you go back to August 2016, the Chief Inspector, at my request, issued what was described as the definitive guidance on curriculum for excellence. I hope, I don't want to steal your best lines, but I hope it wasn't a hodgepodge, Mr. President. That's me giving you an insight.
That's a spoiler.
It is a spoiler, actually. It's me giving you an insight into what awaits you at 12 o'clock. But in that definitive guidance on curriculum for excellence, I put a covering note on it. And I wrote to every teacher, it was sent to every teacher in the country. And the covering note I put on it said that, shared a quote that I'd heard from a teacher who'd said to me, this was a real living teacher, who said to me, if it's not got anything to do with the learner's journey, I ask myself, why am I doing it? And if it's got nothing to do with the learner's journey, I don't do it. Now, if you're operating in a culture of fear, I accept that that is a difficult thing to do. But I'm working very hard, talking to all the relevant players, Association of Directors of Education, my local authority colleagues, Education Scotland, the government's own agencies. If you're operating in to try to change that culture, and I have to say about all of them, they're all with me on that. I think at long last, we've reached a point where there is a much more shared agenda between government, local government, directors of education and Education Scotland on what is the culture and the direction of education. So I've got to turn that sentence that I shared with you in that letter in August 2016 into a reality. And I see it, you asked Catherine about what my experience is going around schools. I see lots of, I'm in schools all the time. And I'm seeing professional developments. And I'm sort of standing there listening to these professional developments being recounted to me, thinking to myself, how did they find the time to do this? Because, you know, everyone tells me the workload is a disaster and it's difficulty. Well, it's because they're operating in an empowered culture where schools are focused on doing things differently, finding the time to change professional practice, and to their credit, they are changing professional practice. And as a consequence, education is strengthened. So I see it happening in schools. Is it happening in every single secondary school in the country? I would think it unlikely, because there will be some secondary schools in the country operating in a fashion that I might not particularly like very much. But I think in many, many schools, that is happening. And I think, so what I would encourage you to do is to be, you know, and this is where my invitation is here to the professional associations to work with me on this issue, is to help to foster that culture. Because it's not ever going to be delivered just because John Swinney sends a letter one, you know, sunny afternoon in August to every teacher in the country. That's not going to change the mood music. It needs active, supportive actions at all levels of the education system. And I think we've got a really good opportunity to do that now.
So John, could I just ask, just to be clear for everybody in this room to take back to their schools, when we're talking about teacher agency and professional judgment, that if, in my opinion as a teacher, if I'm asked to do a task that I don't think has any educational value, that I'm quite within my rights to say I'm not doing that.
Well, is it? I'm just trying to remember. Is it Leavenmouth that you are? Yeah?
My heedy hears that, I'll be in even more trouble, John.
I never thought the SSTA president was in any way fearful within the education system or fearful of his head teacher. The point. Yeah, we need to operate in a collaborative culture. So it's not a blank cheque to you to be a dissident. Heaven forfend, Kevin, a dissident. But what it is to say that I think in a collaborative environment, your head teacher should be working with you to recognise hard realities about, actually, this is not valuable. And I don't want it to be, it won't work if it's an adversarial, I'm the heady, you're the, it should probably be the other way around, Kevin. You're the heady and I'm the classroom teacher and I'm obstreperous and difficult about all these things. What it should be a genuine discussion amongst professionals as to what's the value of this? Is this actually helping the kids' education? And if it's not, let's agree to park it and to spend time developing the outstanding practice in biology that I'm sure you're already delivering to the young people of Leavenmouth. And if that's quoted in your performance assessment, I'll be horrified.
Thank you, John. And Gemma Milne for Dundee.
Good morning, Mr. Swinney. Given the imminent publishing of the report on lead teachers, what do you think of Dundee's proposals to abolish the PT role and introduce faculty leaders?
There was me thinking there were going to be no hot potatoes this morning. A very hot potato has just been served up. I think I don't want to get, if you'll forgive me, I don't want to get into giving a definitive, a specific view on Dundee propositions, but I will make some general comments about the issue. I basically think that progression opportunities within Scottish education have become too narrow. That's why I asked Moira Boland to lead the work that's been taken forward on career progression pathways. I think we have narrowed progression opportunities to far too limited an extent, and to the extent that if you want to progress in your career, you essentially have, up until recently, you only had one opportunity to do that, and that was through administrative and organisational leadership. And that will work for many people, and we need people to go through that route because we need to have good administrative and organisational leaders of our schools. We need to have good, capable head teachers. Of course we do. But we also need many other leading professionals in our education system who are leaders of learning and pedagogy within schools. And the work that, now, I said up until recently, it's interesting how the profession has responded to the use of the flexibility of pupil equity funding. Because I'm now seeing the profession using pupil equity funding to create leading teacher roles, leading teachers in literacy or numeracy, or in closing the attainment gap, recognising that you need specialists to drive aspects of curricular and educational development that are taken forward. So the profession's kind of, marched with its own feet on this question by using the flexibility, the trust. The government said, here's money, we're sending it direct to you and your schools. You make the judgments. I'm not going to second guess what you're doing. You make the judgments. And professionals have decided that some of these roles were necessary to try to help achieve the progress in the wider agenda. Now, that corresponds very directly with the work that Moira Boland has done on career pathways. We had a presentation of the work that's been undertaken at the teacher panel and also at the Scottish Education Council the other week there. I'm very pleased with the direction of thinking. It's had a lot of professional engagement involved in the work. I just can't, I'm desperately looking for my official to see if I can get a friendly face telling me at what stage it's gotten to for publication, but I'm not... 30th of May, there we are. 30th of May is publication, and then it's going to the SNCT for consideration thereafter. But it'll be going to the SNCT with very, very firm government support behind it, because I think it's necessary to provide wider professional development opportunities within the profession, and I think it's a really exciting agenda for us to pursue.
Thank you, John. James?
On behalf of the association, I'd like to thank you for coming in and giving us your kind words. A good number of those things that you've mentioned we fully agree with, but there are, as you would expect, there's a couple that we probably need to do a bit more on. You mentioned about pay, and we reached an agreement. I mean, you made the comment that we accepted a little bit lower down than some of our other colleagues, but actually I think if you'd put that a similar deal at an earlier stage, it would probably have been accepted and it would cost you even less. But as you're well aware, that's not the end of the story. We need to be getting into negotiations on the following pay deals, because this was only a stepping stone in restoration of teachers' pay. Next April, teachers at the top of the main grade will be on 41,000 plus. We estimate that teachers at the top of the main grade should be on 43,000 now. So therefore, you need to be realistic and put some money aside for the pay rise in the years to come. We also welcome the 2 in-service days. It's a shame that they're only for 1 year, because the reasons for having them are very, very important. And I would argue they should be there for all the years going forward, because teachers cannot cope with the workload that we've got at the moment, and the things that you talk about there, teachers have been aspiring for a good number of years. The opportunities for real good quality professional development, the opportunity to collaborate across schools, local authorities and the RICS, and we do welcome the opportunity that may bring. But workload is and will remain a major, major issue. As you're probably aware, during the pay campaign, we did say to your officials in the negotiations that pay was obviously a big point of our argument, but workload and pupil behaviour was equally as important to our members. And if anything, we came to a good point where the rally in October, where we stood alongside with our colleagues from the other associations and proved the point that unions are prepared to stand together and work and aim for a decent pay rise. But we do say thank you for coming forward and finding some extra money to get it over the line. So we can't ignore that fact. But workload, you've referred to empowering the teachers. We've been saying that for years. Professional judgment of the teachers is paramount. Unfortunately, and I think the word you use there, fear culture, is rife in our system. Teachers have been bashed and belted from corner to post and unable now to even think straight. So what we need to be able to do is put that power back, and I think you can put that power back by, you partly said it this morning, we need teachers to say, if this hasn't got anything to do with my children and my learning, then we're not doing it. And unfortunately, the example you gave there again is that the person you had round a round table of group of teachers who talked about the professional judgment, and then a faculty leader demanding something, and then a deputy, then a head teacher, and just in case the inspector comes in. Unfortunately, everyone in this room has heard that expression, we've got to get this ready because an inspector is coming. And there's no notion of the inspector coming, but that's what's the fight that's there all the time. You add that with the local authorities and what they demand as well. And I think I've said to you at a previous meeting, the insight and the score, getting youngsters as many units, as many bits of paper as possible, when in fact we're losing the children on the way through, needs to change. So we need to get what we really are talking about. It should all be the other way round. It's what a classroom teacher should be supported by their faculty leader, should be supported by the deputy and by the head teacher, not the other way round. We've got to put the teacher first and foremost at the front of the argument. The teacher, without the teacher, there is no education. And we've got to remember that. And I think one of the things that we do really should take up with us is we want to be involved in the way forward because we've seen the mistakes that have been made and we can find ways and solutions to go forward. So please invite us, bring us into the conversations and listen to us. We've got to remember, and I keep saying this, and I've said it in many, many places, teacher unions represent their members. They are the voice of their members, and we are accountable to our members. So when we say something, it's not Seamus Searson saying something, it is SSTA members I'm representing. Because you've made a reference to it a few times today about the round table of group of teachers, which is great, you can talk to who you like. But actually you've got to listen to people that have got responsibility and accountable to somebody. You also talked about the teachers panel. Again, a group of selected people, and one or two of them are our members. But who are they accountable to? They're not accountable to the profession, they're accountable to themselves. So we've got to be able to turn that round. And again, I've got the hobby horse of the Scottish Education Council. Everybody's on there except the SSTA. We need to be party to that, what goes on in that particular room, because decisions are made. Decisions are made, and there's only one person that represents teachers at that panel. There's a number of other people, and we've had the conversation before, and we'll keep on saying it. But if you want us to be empowered, then you need to have us at the table, and we need to be there to make the decisions. Again, we talk about the workload. There are a couple of things you could do in terms of workload. You tried to make movement forwards a couple of years ago on removing the units. We accepted that as a workload measure to be removed, but the reality is that's not happened. In every school, we're actually doing more units than we did before because somebody's worried about some score somewhere else. If you were to give a directive and say there are no more units, except, and I know this is what you've said to us before, it's the exception is a youngster that's missed 2 or 3 months because they've been off sick. That's the exception, not the rule. And unfortunately, we've got youngsters who are doing assignments, assessments, who are never going to be assessed on those things, or they'll just be sitting in a drawer and wasted. And what they should be doing is actually be learning, enjoying life and enjoying school. And at the moment, we're killing our young people because of the over-demands. So if we're able to just take that one piece out of the way, that would make a big difference. We've also talked to you about reviewing the national qualification system. And I'm not talking about a wholesale review, I'm talking about actually looking, is it fit for purpose? Is it also fit for purpose for every subject that we teach? We've got a motion coming up later in the day talking about units and assignments. Some people in some subjects are saying the assignments are far too much work and are actually not delivering what they're intended. But then there are colleagues in other subjects who say the assignment's the most important part. What we need is a qualification system that recognises the difference between the subjects instead of everybody, as in the past, 3 units, assignment, a final exam. You don't need that in every subject. So we need to have something that's flexible, and I think that's something we really need to address. The empowerment of teachers. I will come back to it again because we need teachers to take control. We need teachers to say, we are partners in education. Without us, it won't happen. The employers need to work with teacher unions and the government needs to work together. So I will finish on the last point that you made there. The partnership, as far as I'm concerned, is the government, the local authorities, the employers and the teachers' unions. They're the people that deliver, and we need those in the room to come find a way forward. So on that nice cheery note, I'm going to say thank you very much, Mr. Swinney, and do come again.